Good morning, Summit Disciples. We are in week 3 of our Bible study on Philippians, and I don't know about you, but I am getting really excited to know that the Summit is getting closer and closer each week. This week's topic is not exactly one of those chipper, fun topics that we cover in Christianity. It's the topic of suffering. And Paul is exhorting and encouraging the people around him that God is using his suffering to share the good news of Jesus Christ in the world. And so I want to invite you today to think about a topic that's kind of hard. I want to invite you to think about suffering. It isn't hard for us to think about suffering if we look on the news or in the newspaper, or we just look at our Twitter feed or Instagram and see the pain that is around the world today. There are a lot of people suffering in our world. People suffering from famine, people suffering from war, people suffering from abuse, people suffering from a lack of basic human needs in terms of just clean water to drink or a place to take a bath, a meal or 3 meals a day. Most of us have that privilege of having 3 meals a day, but there are many places in the world people go without even 1 meal in a day, or the security of having a meal every day of their lives. So when we think about human suffering, there is no lack of human suffering in the world. And in fact, opposed to how some people want to think about it, there are some who think that following Jesus means that it is somehow an escape from suffering. But that actually is not true to Jesus' teaching, and we know it's not true of our lives. In fact, Jesus knows that as long as sin exists in the world, there will be brokenness, and part of the brokenness from sin in the world is human suffering. We suffer from the pain of broken relationships. We suffer from the pain of disappointment, of physical health that's gone wrong, and of all kinds of other ways that sin manifests in the world and creates space where we suffer as human beings. And part of the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ is that Jesus also suffered. Jesus knows suffering, and Jesus is with us in our suffering. And beyond this, Paul is reminding us not that Jesus has intentionally put us in a place for suffering. That's not how Jesus works. We serve a good God, not a God who intentionally causes suffering. But we do suffer because there is sin in the world around us. And Jesus has promised not only that he will be with us, but as Paul exhorts us and reminds us today, Jesus is with us in the suffering, and there are ways that Jesus calls you and me to help alleviate suffering in the world and to use our suffering to bring forth the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So as you read this week's lesson, I want to invite you to think about, first and foremost, what are your gifts? What are your passions? What really raises up your frustration in the world, and you look at a situation and you think, that is not just. I want to fix that. What are those places where you see people hurting and you think, I just want to help alleviate the pain? And I invite you to spend some time praying about how God wants to use your gifts and your grace and your passions to alleviate suffering in the world. And I also want to invite you to think about your own life. Where are the places in your own life that you're experiencing pain or grief? And I want to invite you this week to ask God, how might you use this pain, this grief, this suffering in my life in order to show others your glory and your goodness? I have a good friend in youth ministry who always says, God never wastes any of our pain. And that is a reminder I want to leave with you this week. No matter what pain you've experienced in your life, if you are willing to allow God to take that, it's like the Good Gungor song that says, God will take and make beautiful things out of our lives. So whatever the mess is, whatever the pain is, whatever the suffering, God can use it for God's glory and for God's good in the world if you and I will open our hearts and our lives to God's healing power and to the vulnerable power that comes when we're vulnerable with one another as we seek that healing. So my prayers are with you this week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon. God bless.